The wind was restless the morning Linden Gray arrived at the quarry mouth. It circled in quick eddies over the granite shelves, carrying the gull's song from the distant cliffs and the briny smell of the sea. Most people came here only to bargain for stone or to watch the great blocks hauled out on ox sledges. But Linden came to listen. He stood perfectly still, boots planted on the weather-chipped earth, palms laid upon the glittering wall. His breathing slowed. To anyone watching, he would appear to be communing with nothing more than cold mineral, yet his attention was fixed on the faintest of stirrings, a tremor in the grain no human ear could catch. The quarry hummed like a hive. Each seam had its own voice, its own small story to tell, and Linden had taught himself to hear every one of them. This morning the stories were muted, subdued. He sensed rain and old strain lines, and beneath them an uneasiness that mirrored his own mood. A note had arrived at his workshop 2 days earlier, sealed in ash-black wax. It bore no crest, only a careful script. "We have lost someone dear. We are told you can help us give her laughter back to the wind. Please come." No signature, no address but the quarry. It was enough. The stone, he felt, would explain the rest. A soft cough made him turn. A man and a woman stood at the edge of the yard. The man's shoulders were straight, but his hands needed the brim of his hat. The woman's cheeks were hollow, eyes ringed by nights without sleep. She clutched a folded shawl against her ribs, scanning the quarry wall as though it might suddenly pronounce an epitaph. "You're Master Gray?" the man asked. "Just Linden," he said gently. "You're the ones who sent for me." The woman's gaze flicked up. "I'm Nara Muir. This is my husband, Selig. Our daughter, Wren." Her voice tightened, syllables snagging on memory. "We buried her 2 weeks ago. She was 17. Linden waited. Grief had its own tempo, and he would not hurry it. Nara drew breath. Wren laughed at everything. When she was little, Selig swore you could find her in a fairground crowd without looking, just by following that laugh. Her smile was a cracked shell. "I'm afraid we're forgetting the sound already." Selig cleared his throat. "My father told me of an apprentice who could wake the music in rock. 15 years back, that must have been you. We don't want a grand tomb, just something that holds her laughter, so the wind can carry it to us." Linden listened with more than ears. Grief had its vibrations, too. He nodded. "Stone can remember," he said. "But we must choose the right piece and shape it the way it wishes." The couple exchanged uncertain glances. Stone that wished? Yet they had come because ordinary words and marble angels had failed them. They followed Linden onto a narrow ledge streaked with quartz. Here the granite ran pale silver, an old river frozen in time. Linden laid both hands on the surface. His eyes closed. The world narrowed to pressure points beneath his fingertips. He felt a low, playful trill, like water drumming on copper pots, hidden under heavier, solemn chords. That lightness, there. He tracked the vibration along a vein swirling through the parent rock, ignored the deeper bass that grumbled from the quarry floor, and settled on a block marked with a red X for the next harvest. The block chimed inside him. "She's here," Linden murmured. Naira's brow creased. "In the stone?" "A resonance that matches the feeling you carry, a bright note under grief. It'll hold her laughter." He knelt, touched the dust line at the block's base, then looked up at the foreman overseeing the distant cutting crew. "May I buy this square? Leave it rough on 3 sides, I need the living edges." The foreman shrugged. Stone was stone, so long as it yielded coin. Papers were signed, the block set aside. While oxen and pulleys worked, Linden explained his plan. We'll carve a hollow inside, he said, tracing arcs in the air, thin enough that wind can pass through and resonate. We'll open small ventries, flutes really, tuned to different pitches. When the sea breeze comes, it'll strike each flute and play a chord. If I read the grain right, the chord will match Wren's laugh. Nera pressed fingertips to her lips. But how can you be sure? I'll listen as we work, he answered, realizing they needed more than craftsmanship. They needed to be part of the making. If you're willing, you'll listen too. And so the work began. The block was delivered to Lyndon's clifftop workshop, a timber barn perched above sea cliffs where gull feathers collected like snow along the rafters. The first days were devoted to roughing out the shape. Neither a statue nor a monument in the old sense, but a curved pillar about 5 feet tall, swelling at midsection and tapering at both ends like an hourglass, halted in motion. Lyndon left one side raw, the natural surface of the quarry wall, believing that unfinished face would speak of beginnings uncompleted. He invited Nera and Selig to stay in the guest loft. Grief, he knew, seldom slept. Best to give it a place to pace. Each morning they descended the ladder to the workshop floor, smelling of coffee and cedar shavings. Naira's hands, once pale as milk, grew nicked and powdered with stone dust. Selig learned to wield a rasp and mallet, though his strokes were heavy until Lyndon corrected his grip. Together they drilled the preliminary hollows. By the second week, the sculpture resembled a giant conch, its interior coil almost wide enough for a child to crawl inside. Lyndon alone stepped in barefoot, closing his eyes to the cool hush. He clicked his tongue, listening for bounce and spread of sound. The stone answered with a note too low for human terror or joy. It was a neutral hum, waiting to be coaxed higher. Progress. Outside, Nera asked, "What does it say?" "That it's ready for a higher key." Wren must have had a bright voice. She did. Nera wiped her nose on the back of her wrist. She cracked notes when she sang, but the laugh was clear. It bounced. Then we carve narrower flutes, sharper curves. The air will speed through and raise the pitch. He gestured for their tools. Nights fell early as autumn pressed in. Salt mist slicked the barn panels, and storm lanterns hissed over the workbench. Sometimes Naira would hum tunelessly, unsure why she did, and Selig would sit outside watching stars form and fade behind clouds. Lyndon kept a sketchbook filled with cross-sections. Yet before chisel hit stone, he always listened, adjusting the design to microscopic lines only he could sense. On the 10th night, Nera dreamed of Wren. In the dream, her daughter stood ankle-deep in surf, laughing as she tried to trap foam bubbles in her cupped hands. The laugh skated across the water, a bubbling trill that made Nera's heart lift. And then Wren vanished. Nera woke sobbing, but the dream gifted her something. She could recall the laugh again, full and sharp like broken glass catching sun. The following morning she told Lyndon. He asked her to describe every rise and fall, every tiny catch in the throat. She did, and he transposed her description into lengths on the stone. Flute A should open at 21 degrees from the main vent, flute B at 39, each bore angled to intersect the central chamber at different heights. Selig listened, skeptical but willing. When the measurements were set, they began the delicate carving. This phase demanded patience. Too wide a bore, and the wind would roar instead of sing. Too narrow, and it would wheeze. Lyndon taught them to hold damp cloth over fresh cuts. "Let the water show you the flow," he said. The cloth darkened where air would move fastest, guiding the next chisel strike. Days slid over each other like thin pages. The sculpture's surface turned satiny under files, except for the raw cliff face left untouched. The apprentices, grief sculptors now, found silent rhythm. Nera timed her hammer strikes to an old lullaby. Selig counted under his breath. Even the gulls seemed to hush, curious observers of art and sorrow. One afternoon a storm swept in unannounced, slashing rain through the open doors. Linden covered the sculpture with oiled tarps while Selig barred the shutters. Thunder rolled so close the ground trembled. Nyara, heart-pounding, felt the vibration in the stone even through canvas, felt it answer with a muted thump. When lightning strobed across the rafters, she imagined Wren dancing among the bright forks, laughter flicking like sparks. After the storm passed, wind rushed through gaps in the boarded window. To everyone's astonishment, the covered sculpture emitted a thin, wavering whistle. Linden's eyes widened. Even muffled its talking. He hauled off the tarps. Rain-cooled air poured through unfinished vents, and a chord fluttered out, warbled, tentative, but undeniably playful. Nyara clapped both hands over her mouth. Tears leaked between her fingers. Selig's shoulders shook. "It's her," Nyara gasped. "It's not perfect, but it's her." "It will refine once the final flutes are cut," Linden promised, though awe tugged at his own chest. Stone seldom gave voice so soon. It was eager, as if the girl herself urged them on. The last stage required only Linden's chisels, silver-edged, tuned to frequencies no one else detected. He worked at dawn when the barn was quiet, letting each tap ring through rising light. Tiny slivers curled away like pages of a secret journal. He sanded edges smooth with stitched cloth soaked in sea brine, an old trick for building resonance. When the surfaces glowed pearlescent, he stepped back. The sculpture seemed to pulse with restrained breath. "Tomorrow," he told the Muirs, "we carry her to the cliff." They scarcely slept. Morning arrived clear and wind-polished. 4 villagers helped lever the sculpture onto a cart padded with kelp. The procession climbed a narrow path to a headland overlooking both village and sea, a place Wren had loved for its view of migrating whales. Linden located a natural plinth of basalt and seated the granite column with wedges. The raw cliff face of the sculpture faced east, toward sunrise. The fluted side faced the open water. Nyara smoothed her daughter's shawl over her shoulders. Selig rested a hand on the stone. The air smelled of wet grass and far-off rain. "Listen," Linden whispered. A breeze wandered up from the tide flats, faint enough to barely stir hair. It threaded the lowest flute. A low chuckle issued forth. Nyara's lips parted. A second gust followed, stronger, dancing through higher vents. The note rose, quickened, fractured into bubbling cascades. It was unmistakable now. A teenager's radiant laugh, half music, half mischief, unburdened by any sorrow of flesh. The sound skittered along the headland like gulls chasing crumbs, then soared above, weaving with the wind. Nyara fell to her knees, not in despair, but wonder. Selig knelt beside her, arms around her shoulders. Tears came for both, but they were pierced by a smile that wouldn't stay tucked away. The laughter filled the air, echoing off cliff walls, mixing with wave crash until one could no longer tell water from joy. Villagers gathered, drawn by the sound. Children pointed, delighted. Elders put hands to ears, perplexed yet moved. They saw a woman and man sitting close to a stone, tears shining in the fine spray, and they understood enough. Linden stood a little apart. The sculpture vibrated through the soles of his boots, up his bones, singing through his ribs. He remembered his own sister's voice, lost long ago, and let the memory pass through him without pain. Stone kept secrets. It also lent them back when asked kindly. Nara rose at last. "How do we thank you?" Keep listening, he said. Stone asks only that someone hear it. But Nera insisted. Come to our home any time. You'll have a place at our table. I will come, he said, though he doubted he'd ever claim the favor. Gifts given in grief were best left uncollected. Weeks went by. Autumn deepened. Whales breached in the bay, and the sculpture sang whenever wind shifted from the south. Some said the notes changed, softer at dusk, brighter at noon. Parents brought restless infants to nap under the stone. Fishermen touched it before sailing. A traveling bard, hearing rumors, tried to imitate the chord on tin whistle but could not find the exact intervals. He declared the pitch between heartbeats. One evening, Linden visited the headland alone. Twilight blurred sea and sky. He pressed a flat palm to the stone and closed his eyes. The laughter that spilled forth was as clear as the day they'd set the monument. Yet he sensed nuance within, an undercurrent of gratitude, maybe even of growth. Wren was not fixed. Each gust rendered her a little differently, as living voices do. He smiled. Footsteps sounded behind him. Naira, carrying a lantern, joined him. I still fear the day I'll stop recognizing her, she confessed. Stone is memory in slow motion, Linden replied. It changes at the pace of wind and season. Your memory will change too, and you'll meet it in the middle. That's not loss. That's living. Naira exhaled, tension unwinding. Will the laughter ever fade? Only if the stone cracks or the wind dies. And even then, fragments hold echoes. You'd only need to listen closer. She traced a flute's rim with trembling fingers. It feels warm. It's the friction of air and maybe a little of your own heartbeat. They stood together, silent, listening to Wren mock scold a seagull's cry, or so it seemed. When night settled full, they said goodbye. That winter, the village endured brutal storms. Gale winds rattled shutters, toppled stacks of lobster pots, uprooted street posts. Yet the memorial on the headland withstood the fury. In the heart of each tempest, some swore they heard Wren's laughter vault over the howl like a skylark defying thunder, steady and resilient. The sound gave courage. Lanterns were trimmed rather than doused. Songs sung rather than swallowed. In spring, a raven-haired woman arrived with her own sorrow, a soldier brother lost on distant fields. She sought the sculptor whose stones sang. Linden met her at the quarry, placed her hand on a seam of rose-black marble, and listened. The marble's voice was different, solemn, yet carrying a young man's quick step. Linden nodded. Yes, he said. We can find his whistle in this. News traveled. Some came with purses heavy, others with nothing but ache. Linden accepted all, though he limited himself to a single commission at a time. Calling voices from stone cost focus, and he would not dilute it chasing gold. His workshop became a halfway house between silence and remembrance, where grief labored until it could stand beside the memory without falling. Years later, gray now salted through his beard. Linden visited the headland again. The sculpture had darkened slightly under lichen, yet its surface remained smooth, its flutes clear. He set his tools down and leaned against the raw cliff face edge. A spring breeze teased. Laughter rang out, grown richer with subtle overtones, but still undeniably Wren. Linden imagined her 27 now, perhaps teaching little cousins to skim stones. The thought did not weigh heavy. It floated. He realized Nera's fear had not come to pass. The mother still recognized her daughter's voice, because the voice grew as she did in memory, unfixed by death. The memorial was not an anchor, but a kite string, giving shape to air yet allowing endless flight. Linden closed his eyes, let the sound fill him. Then, without opening them, he whispered into the stone, Thank you for letting me listen." A small gust answered, a playful riff like someone covering a giggle. Lyndon laughed aloud. He picked up his chisels, walked down the path toward the quarry where a new family waited, where another stone was ready to speak.